Real Stories Tapes True Crime is your new true crime podcast fix. In our first season, we'll explore suspicious deaths at a California hospital and a skydiver landing dead on a suburban driveway with a bag containing guns, drugs, and night vision goggles. To join our investigation, search and subscribe to Real Stories Tapes True Crime on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you find your podcasts.
It's early morning, and domestic worker Mrs. Marcus unlocks her employer's door to a shocking discovery. The usually immaculate home of her boss is in a state of turmoil. There's signs of a struggle, and the body of Bruno Bronn lies on his back on the carpet in the outside granny flat, the upper part of his body covered with a green rug. Bruno Bronn's name was synonymous with the well-known Cape Town gay nightclub, the Bronx, and he was a prominent, well-known figure in the local gay community. Bruno and his late partner, Jono, had started the nightclub some 20 years earlier. It was the cornerstone of what was to become known as the Pink Strip.
Cape Town in 2000, coming out the closets, and it was the place to go to. And it was in those days when there was less acceptance in the workplace, less acceptance at home, so the only really spot that you met another gay person was at Bronx.
Somerset Road in Greenpoint, and the adjacent suburb of De Waterkant, the hub of the gay community over the past 20 years, with its proliferation of gay clubs, pubs, and restaurants. Gay and straight people alike flock to the myriad clubs to party the night away. It's firmly on the map as an international tourist destination, and the iconic Bronx nightclub was at its center. Well-known Bruno Bronn was the club's owner.
There was this Greenpoint village, and it was where everyone sort of came to. A place where everyone would just flock to every weekend to come and meet someone or to see someone. I mean, especially in Christmas season, it was the spot. And other places popped up. Cafe Manhattan came, the first gay restaurant, and it just became this strip. And of course, the strip added the area, De Waterkant. Then the gays used to start buying in De Waterkant, and because they bought, the price of the houses went up, and that's when development came.
Bruno and his partner were not just business partners, they'd also been life partners for many years.
Jono and Bruno were known as this power couple. Again, most people knew Jono, the short, bald guy, the face of that. We didn't really know Bruno so much. And you sort of saw him, you saw Jono more, and they were just this couple. And then mid-2000s, Jono died.
Bruno was inconsolable. Friends say he never recovered from the loss.
That was the start of Bruno sort of sinking into his little hole. It was Bruno and the dogs in the house that they shared together, and that's when you started not seeing Bruno. And as someone, you noticed that he wasn't at his venue anymore. The venue was getting run down, the toilets were breaking and not being fixed, and it was that stage you saw that something was up. He wasn't coping with this separation.
The Bronx's resident DJ, David Human, was also a close friend of Bruno's.
He was very heartbroken about it, and he was very lonely. And him and Jono apparently formed a very good team running Bronx. With Jono not there, he was lost. He was really lost, and he didn't trust anyone.
Bruno felt their friends deserted him after his lover and business partner died.
He was shocked and dumbstruck by the fact that nobody was there for him.
Bruno's increasing reclusiveness did affect his business, though David says he was still a mentor to him and taught him so much of what he knows about the nightclub scene today.
He wanted to entertain the gay community on a world-class scale.
Bruno was an avid supporter of the gay community over many years and sponsor of the Gay Pride Festival. The procession of floats would sail past his door every year, with Bruno lapping up the fun.
The one picture that everyone remembers of Bruno was him being on the Bronx float at Pride. And it just so happens that, you know, there's a Pride every year. So you miss him. I think that there's very few pictures of him out there. And the one we do remember is him being on the Bronx float. And that's what he'll be remembered for, as the guy leading the float.
But there was another side to Bruno. Tempers and mood swings, say friends and staff.
He would just lose it completely. Like, you couldn't explain anything. He would just completely lose his cool.
Deep down inside, he cared, and he knew exactly what he was doing.
He was very, very much affected to what what other people thought of him. Very much so.
Bruno was sad and he wasn't happy. It shocked me kind of that a person of his stature was so lonely and basically a prisoner in his own home. Because I think after John died, obviously he went through a lot of emotional trauma.
Bruno seemed desolate, unable to move on.
He hates computers. He would never go on a computer. So he wouldn't go out and he wouldn't go on the internet to meet, and he could have met anybody on the internet. Because there were different people that are with similar likes to him. He wouldn't do that.
John Kutzer began working as a bouncer for Bruno at Bronx nightclub in 2011.
He gave him a job as a bouncer at his club, and it was the easiest thing. And he was attracted to that rough, hardcore kind of guy.
Friends and colleagues close to Bruno say the two men began a sexual relationship.
John was a rough diamond, and truth of the matter is, it seems like Bruno was attracted to those type of people.
Bruno seemed happier. His temper tantrums lessened.
At first, Bruno got a need filled, which, must be honest, which suited us perfectly because he would be a lot easier to deal with. He was a lot more relaxed.
It was just a very cold, sexual, that was all it about.
But being that person that John was, he very quickly saw opportunities of how he can benefit from it financially.
For a while, Bruno seemed to turn a blind eye to things John was doing.
He realized that John was using him, and he was purely, in my opinion, feeding his stick habit. Because there was times that Bruno had to drive him around on a raspberry and, to go and buy his stick for him, crap like that.
Friends say Kutzer was never part of their social circle and didn't attend their regular Sunday braais at Bruno's home. But all of them were aware of the somewhat dark sexual relationship between the two men.
From what I know of Bruno and John, it was a very kinky, fetish-orientated sexual relationship. It was in no means a type of relationship where he would spend the night. They never actually slept in the bed. That's why the maid was very confused about the relationship John and Bruno had.
But John Kutzer vehemently denies he and Bruno were ever involved sexually. He says he was just an employee and a friend to the club owner. About 6 months before Bruno was murdered, he told his friends that Kutzer was harassing him for money and he wanted to end their relationship. The friends say Bruno was fearful of Kutzer and begged him to leave him alone, but Kutzer refused.
He obviously realized what John was doing and he tried to end the relationship, and John just wouldn't budge. For example, he would ring the doorbell at 3, 4 o'clock in the morning. Now, Bruno's front door was a little bit below, and then there were steps going up towards the gate, and she had to look and then go up. So the doorbell will ring, and the dogs will bark, and Bruno will go outside and walk up the stairs to the gate, and there will be nobody there. And as he turned around walking down the stairs, John would be sitting on the stairs, looking up at him and saying, "You didn't think you're going to get rid of me that easily, did you?"
Just days before being killed, Bruno seemed terrified, calling friends, asking for help.
And in the 3 or 4 days leading to his murder, Bruno was getting hold of his close friends to say that he is in a state and he's worried and this guy's in the house and he's climbing over the wall and help me now.
That Tuesday morning, the 7th of February 2012, when Bruno Bronn's body was discovered, detectives and a forensic team began to comb the crime scene looking for clues. His house was set back from the road down a flight of stairs. It had a security fence and gate. No sign of forced entry led police to believe Bruno Bronn had let the murderer into the house. It indicated it must have been someone he knew. Photographs at the scene also showed the immaculate sitting room, study and kitchen, something Bronn's friends say was typical of the obsessively neat and tidy man.
I used to come home after the club, which was like 4 o'clock in the morning, and I used to make myself something to eat, right? And I used to make sure that I cleaned up after myself 100%, not leave a crumb in it. But hell or high water, because he's an obsessive compulsive, he knew that I'd made myself something to eat and would kind of freak out.
A patio and barbecue area led to an outside granny flat. Close friends say this was where Bruno had sex with Kutsa.
There was never an indication that somebody spent the night in bed because, quite frankly, they didn't sleep. They had sex. And it wasn't in Bruno's bedroom, because Bruno wouldn't... I don't think Bruno would have liked that because that was him, John's space. They did it in an outside flat where he got murdered. So it was outside the house in a outside apartment flat or whatever they did. And they purely had sex. That was it. And then he would leave.
Detectives found cigarette butts on the patio leading to the flat. Inside the sparsely furnished room, Bruno Bronn's body clad only in shorts, lying face upward, a rug partially draped over him. When police removed the rug, they saw the victim's hands were tied with a leather belt, his face covered with a blood-stained white towel. His legs were covered in bruises, and his knees and elbows showed severe carpet burns. The autopsy confirmed the detective's suspicions. Bruno Bronn had been strangled, and he died of asphyxia. Only a few items were missing: a laptop, a cell phone, and Bronn's silver BMW that neighbors heard speeding off that night.
Early Tuesday morning, I got this phone call, and I was still in deep sleep, that I should go and see what's happening at Bruno's house. Somebody that I know drove past the house, and it was cordoned off, and something's going on. So immediately, I thought, what the hell? I feared. I kind of instinctively knew immediately what happened, because of what Bruno told me a day or two before, and my immediate reaction and thought and thing was, John actually did it.
Within days, police arrested 4 suspects: Frederick Willem John Kutser, Fariz Ali, and Ahmad Topher. These 3 were charged with murder and robbery with aggravating circumstances. All pleaded not guilty. The 4th suspect, Kurt Rispi, quickly turned state's witness. He said he was a friend of Kutser's, did patrolling services for his mother's security company in the area, and acted only as the driver for the evening. He claimed he was unaware of the death of the deceased until afterwards and knew nothing of the stolen goods. So what exactly happened on that fateful Monday night in February 2012? Kutser and 2 other men had driven to Bronn's house in Ocean View Drive, Greenpoint, late that night. Kutser allegedly told his friends that he and Bruno had had a falling out. He needed to collect his belongings from the house. They'd driven there at about 11 p.m., and there the stories of the accused begin to differ. The detectives and state prosecutor began attempting to unravel the truth. Kutser had been released on bail, but continued to act like he didn't have a care in the world.
I saw John once at the shopping center, and he pulled a zap sign at me. The arrogance of it is like he has like nothing to worry about. Yeah, he was very, very arrogant.
The trial began in the Cape High Court in October 2013. Western Cape Judge President John presided. The version of events between the three accused differed markedly. Accused number one, John Coetzee, tried to frame the other two for Bronn's murder. They in turn blamed him. But the evidence pointed firmly to accused number one, John Coetzee, as the murderer. The state argued that Coetzee needed money for outstanding drug debts and went to Bronn's house that night to get money. The driver turned state witness Kurt Arispe testified that Coetzee asked to be dropped off on the road below Ocean View Drive, where Bronn's house was, at the bottom of a flight of steps leading up to the road above. It was 11 p.m. A neighbor testified that she heard an unusual noise coming from Bruno Bronn's house around 11 that night. She said she clearly heard someone calling out for help, but when she responded, someone replied that everything was all right. The neighbor testified that she saw a white man fitting Coetzee's description, closing the glass door to the guest house and talking on his cell phone. Soon afterwards, the other men arrived, and half an hour later, she heard Bronn's BMW speeding off. It was being used to transport goods removed from Bronn's home, bags filled with trinkets, a cell phone and a laptop, which were later sold for drugs. But it was the medical forensic evidence that proved the most incriminating for John Coetzee. His DNA was found under Bruno Bronn's fingernails, indicating they had tussled. It was also on the leather belt used to bind the dead man's hands together. And perhaps most damning, Coetzee's DNA was on the towel that had been used to suffocate Bronn.
I remember walking down the street towards the court, and the High Court has got round steps leading up to the front door. And from quite a far distance already, I kind of stopped dead in my tracks because I couldn't believe who was standing right in the middle. On top of the entrance of the High Court was John, dressed in black suit and black sunglasses, looking, in his mind, ever so cool. And I was like, firstly, I was like confused. I mean, a person that's about to go on trial for murder, if that was me, I would hide in the bloody toilets, you know, or stuff like that. But he was standing there as if he is the king of the world. And arrogant, totally arrogant.
David Human testified in court. Coetzee did his best to intimidate him on the stand.
When I was giving evidence, at one stage, the judge actually had to ask him to behave himself in court and not laugh at my statement or make remarks that that's a lie or, you know, stuff like that. And he kind of laughed me off. The judge literally had to shut him up at one stage.
Bruno's friends and colleagues found being in court tough going.
On one occasion, as we left, I mean, we couldn't get out of there soon enough. So we all rushed to the elevator and so on. It was a small elevator and it was literally full. It was full. So Bash, one of my colleagues, pressed the ground button and the closed door, and on came John. And John literally put his hand in front of the door, preventing it from closing, pushed it open and came in, bashed him around and said, "I'm sorry, the lift is full," and pushed him out. He pushed Bash out of the way and literally forced himself in the lift. By that time, the door was closing, and now we're stuck in the lift with John. Probably the longest lift ride I had in my life. And to be that close to the person that done all this horrible thing, you feel sick. It's a kind of sickness you feel I've never felt in my life before. To my stomach. Coming close to a person like that makes your hair stand up.
The court case dragged on with delays due to Coetzee and his co-accused claiming ill health. Then, finally, in 2014, the verdict was given. Frederick John Coetzee was found guilty of murdering Bruno Bronn. He was sentenced to life imprisonment. His two co-accused, Fariz Ali and Ahmed Tofo, were acquitted on the murder and robbery charges. But many questions remain unanswered.
Bruno is so linked to Bronx, which has a massive place in Cape Town's gay history. And I believe that the truth needs to be out. We need to know what happened, because we don't know at the moment. We don't know. John was a regular visitor to Bruno's house. He knew what was there and what wasn't there. Why did he decide to go and murder him to steal a laptop and a phone? It doesn't make any sense at all.
There were rumors of a large amount of cash somewhere in the house.
He had where you go and you park your car, and the thing closes behind you, and you put money in where the government doesn't know, blah, blah, blah. It's basic, and it's all, the security is brilliant. Only you can go in, and it's one of the, and he told me that 2 years before Bronx closed, he had 900,000 Rand cash there. And then the month before he died, he had told me he only had 200,000 left. So all that money had gone wasted to Bronx because it was just going downhill.
A few days before the murder, CCTV footage saw him driving to the unit.
They did see Bruno 3 days before he died on camera going in and going out. But you don't know what he took out, what he brought in. You don't, because they don't film, obviously, in the actual place where you're putting the money in.
But no money was found at his home.
The cell phone, the laptop, that was all just a total cover. I know besides the money he had in his safe deposit, on New Year he had 80,000 Rand in his home. I know that. He had hidden it somewhere. We tried to find it after. He had hidden it under the floor there somewhere, and we couldn't find it. He had that money in the house. It was definitely not about a laptop or a cell phone. It was a lot more than that.
Bruno's friends doubt whether Kutse went there that night with the intention of killing him, but rather to extort money.
When he killed Bruno, he then panicked, he didn't know what to do. So then he called Boy and them to help come. What does he do now? At the same time, when they came in there, they could rob this house.
John rocked up there. Bruno wanted to get rid of him. He made a racket to save the peace. He let him in. They had a fight. John had to shut him up because he was calling for help. The neighbor heard him. So he shut him up too much. And then he realized, oh my God, and then he had to obviously finish it. And, so in my opinion, that is what happened.
Cape Town's gay community lost a man who had made a difference.
He was a trailblazer. He boldly went and opened this fabulous club, which so many of us hold dear. And what Bronx has for so much of us is that special place in our hearts at that time. It might not be what it is today, but it was at that time where I couldn't be gay at home or at work, and this is where I could be gay, and it was a jewel. It was a blast. I had some great, wonderful times at Bronx. And it was people like Bruno and Jono that made me want to open my own bar and my own club, and and I'm in this business today.
This person who was responsible for so much in the gay community, everybody who had heard about Bruno's death was, how could this happen? Blah. All these youngsters all saying, oh no, and they came to Bruno's funeral, and you know what? Maybe 5 of them have bitched. I mean, this person is responsible for you to walk in the streets hand in hand. He's responsible for so much. Surely you could just owe it to him just to come to his funeral. None of the youth came, and that was very sad for me. That was incredibly sad for me. No one paid their respects at all.